So it's really a gathering of people.
How would you define pedagogy?
The pedagogy comes from the work of Paulo Freire, who was a liberatory educator in the early part of the 1960s, who developed some of the foundational work of liberatory pedagogy, in which he said that the best relationship of human beings to each other is a dialogue. And if people are in dialogue, we can create a future together, we can express our concerns and our disappointments and our lack of clarity, but begin to make real clarity and create a common humanity. That the presence of monologues was what was really creating the problems for human beings around the world. The monologues were one person setting the agenda, one person having power, and other people not being able to respond. So Freire set up a system of education, which he said that the core task of liberatory education for the oppressed is to develop dialogue, so that people who have been used to monologues of their life can understand what dialogue is capable of doing and be able to create a collaborative future. So that's the work that Freire did, and then Augusto Boal, in a remarkably parallel way, not even knowing about Freire, developed a theater that was essentially about dialogue among the audience and with the audience, with the stage and the activities of the actors. So we felt when we began to coordinate with Boal to bring him up to the United States for a conference, that it was only appropriate that his collaborative work with Paulo Freire be also included in this. And so we are now the Pedagogy and Theater of the Press Conference, in which we try to stress both areas and bring in people who will speak on the subject, arrange for panels and discussions, allow for participants to develop their workshops, and serve as a network for communication.
So how did you find the need to become the founder of the Pedagogy Theater of the Oppressed, and how really has it evolved since '95?
Well, there's a sort of a short story to tell that I saw Boal's work in 1991 at a conference, and it wasn't him. I just saw some people doing it, and I said, I understand this. I finally understand it. I'd read the work, but didn't quite get how it actually manifested itself in practice. So I was in charge of that conference for the next year down in Atlanta. So I decided to call Boal. So Boal said, okay, I'll come up to your conference. And I said, do some workshops. He said, I can do one-day workshop, form, rainbow, and image. And then he was also the conference speaker. Thank you. He was also the conference speaker. And he did a keynote address. And I think at that time he really carved a new way for theater to be practiced in the United States. He invited me down to Rio de Janeiro for the 7th International Festival of Theater of the Oppressed the next year. And I invited him to Omaha in the next year, in '94, to have a one-day workshop to show what it was. So many people were excited. They said, let's have a conference. So in '95, we had a conference. So it really kind of evolved very organically. In '96, and so Boal was the key person, and we thought we'd have maybe 75 people at the conference. We got 200. And the next year we had, yes?
How long are you going to be here more?
Maybe 20 minutes?
20 minutes?
Yeah.
So we need to set for another group.
Thank you. Is 20 minutes okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. So we decided that we would have a conference that went beyond just the Theater of the Oppressed, would include pedagogy. And so Paulo Freire was invited up for the '96 conference. And both Freire and Boal were present in Omaha at the '96 conference. And then we've just continued to have a conference every year. Boal has been at, I think, 9 of the 11 conferences. And now he's a regular feature. It allows him an opportunity every year to communicate new techniques he's discovering, new thoughts, plus educate people in the basics of the Theater of the Oppressed.
You mentioned that you're the theater director at University of Nebraska at Omaha and the drama school.
Yes, right.
How many schools are you aware of that involve Theater of the Oppressed, and how do they differ nationwide and worldwide?
It's much more community-based work. There are a number of schools that have some kind of work in Theater of the Oppressed or liberatory theater or even theater of social change. I would say maybe right now about a half a dozen that to greater or lesser extent have some study in theater of social change that includes Boal. I'm disappointed after 10 years of sort of watching this develop that there aren't many, many, many more. But I think part of the reason is that Boal really has sort of a class element to his theater. He's talking about the oppressed and people of the underside. And there's a certain extent to which I think people who are working in the theater believe that we in the theater, we sort of own theater techniques. We own theater performance and direction and theater in the public eye. And I think it's difficult for programs to see it as something that is profoundly democratic, as his is, turning the tools of theater over to the entire community in a way that's not, community theater, but really a developed theater for social change and social education. So programs have been leery about adopting it, I think, because of that sense of ownership. I think that's breaking down slowly, and that the achievement of Boal will become more and more part of the regular curriculum.
Have you seen Theater of the Oppressed implemented in demonstrations thus far, and personally?
Yes, I've seen it. One of the examples I give is when I was in Rio de Janeiro in 1993, a horrible thing happened. Children are regularly shot in Rio de Janeiro by gangs of vigilantes because they get into the wrong part of town. Rio is the home of probably 20,000 homeless children who run in packs and protect each other. But this particular pack has gotten crosswise at the police, and the police tend to at night serve as vigilantes for private networks and private organizations. And they were in an area of town they weren't supposed to be in, and so while they were sleeping up against a wall, a number of them were shot. And 9 of them died. Many were injured, but 9 died. And this horrible sort of, murder so stunned the people at the conference, we decided to sort of make a theater response. So first of all, we actually marched and went down to see the president of Brazil, who was in one of the hotels. But we also participated in a rally demonstration against such murders sponsored by the Party Trabalhador, the Workers' Party. And for that, we developed a half dozen image theater pieces that we did throughout the demonstration, went various places and did these presentations that were image theater. And it was quite remarkable. It was quite a wonderful experience. I remember in particular there was a group, I think it was from Puerto Rico, that were stilt walkers, and they developed stilts and put on these large sort of bird costumes that they made out of paper. And then they would be pursuing these children, their people, but the smaller part of their people, who were in these white outfits, running through the crowd, trying to get away from these large black bird puppets. The police were coming, swooping down on them. It was quite extraordinary.
So if I were to go to Rio and I would see almost like characters being created like within a workplace, like sometimes like they have like invisible theater at cafes and they're trying to promote social awareness about domestic violence or something, for example, or violence or too much violence in Rio. Is that really Augusto Boal's intention to show and highlight the oppression of individuals, or is it more of a way to accentuate on the value of the human spirit? And
I would say that what you could say about form theater and image theater is certainly.
If you would define
form theater is a theater in which the audience watches a short scene dealing with issues that matter to them, with a protagonist who's trying to get what they want. At the end of the scene, the individual fails to get what they want, and it should engender in the audience a sense of wanting to do something about it. Then the audience is asked to talk among themselves about this. If they were that person, what would they do? Then we begin the scene again, and the audience is asked to stop the play if they see a moment where they would do something different to change the outcome. And they stop the play, and they get in, they take the place of the protagonist and do something different while the rest of the actors improvise in such a way as to keep pressure on that person to test out this solution. And then after a lot of applause, the person sits down and we talk about if this is a good solution, if this really something could work, can we do it, how would we do it, and then someone else has an idea, and someone else has an idea. So we show a situation with many possible solutions. Then you go on in the play and intervene in other places. So that's the forum. We create a forum for discussion. Image theaters where we create images of oppression using our bodies. These can be done in workshops and performances, and then invite the audience to come up and change the image, either by sculpting it or changing it themselves, or replacing the protagonist in the image so as to show what else person could do. In other words, the next frame in the film, rather than going toward the defeat of the protagonist, what could be the next frame that would make a movement toward liberation, toward a new kind of future. So in all this, it's highly dialogical. Boal wants people to be talking about this and discussing it, but also sharing through images and sounds and gestures, not just through words, what their deep desires are for a better future. So these forms of theater are clearly sort of the social part of his theater, where we're looking at the oppressions that we all share, that we all have, in terms of like getting better health care, getting clean water, getting a safe place to live, being free from violence. We all share these things. But Boal's also developed, when he got to Europe in 1974, 75, he began to develop techniques of sort of community-based psychotherapy, where people could gather together and using the images, the image theater techniques in a very particular way, help each other learn to understand individual oppressions, what was happening inside of them, what was happening that was keeping them from having the full life they wanted to have. So this is another extraordinary achievement of Boal, is to take the larger sort of social-related forms of theater and turn it toward a very individual kind of thing, where we realize that from time to time our oppressions are really inside of us. They're not necessarily the large social prohibitions. They are how we are prohibiting ourselves from getting what we want. Another remarkable development. So it's Boal's desire to deal with oppression, whether individual or social, in a way that is effective, that is in dialogue, that is dynamic, and that is fun, that people are having fun at it, that they have there's enjoyment. Certainly in Rainbow or in Image or in Form, the moments of terrific seriousness and terrific sort of passion for the moment and needing to stay with the moment. But in the larger context is people are in dialogue, enjoying. One of Boal's great phrases is, have the courage to be happy. Be happy. Whatever you need to do, be happy. Without, of course, interfering with other people's ability to be happy. Do the things that make us happy. And Boal's theater make people happy.
What do you say to those that are young and feel oppressed and have a sense of not feeling that theater might be a perfect avenue to reform or to show that they are oppressed? And what would you say to them that can accentuate the real aims of theater of the oppressed, and how it can help them and purify them, make them feel?
I don't know about purify.
Well, make them feel
make them feel that they have some power.
Correct.
I would say that the theater of the oppressed is in no way coercive. It doesn't invite people and want people to come in because they should or they must or whatever. It's really a theater that says, if this looks like something that could be useful for you, then come try it out. And if people are not at that place, they think it's something for them that they want to do, great. There's no concern about that. We all need it. We need to, in a sense, believe that people are doing the best they can at this time in their life. They're doing for themselves the best they can. And Boal would like to invite people in and say, perhaps we can do even better. And in these techniques of theater, see what appeals to you. Maybe sometimes I would suggest go to a theater of the oppressed event, go to a forum theater event or an image theater. You don't have to get involved, you don't have to do anything, but just I think the very process of watching forum theater, knowing that you are implicated, that you could do something, you could go take what you were imagining in your mind, what you're thinking might be a better future, and do it. It's possible for you to do it. We'll be out shortly.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So when we have people doing that kind of imagining, as we say, if you can't imagine something different, there won't be anything different. But if you can use this theater to imagine something different, in fact, people can begin to practice the change that they want. They can be the change they expect, as Gandhi said.
So who are your critics?
Well, it's very interesting. Boal is very philosophical about that. He said he has been met by the critique of silence.
Passivity.
People just not paying attention or not responding. The academic community does not respond very much. I think personally one of the reasons is that Boal has so successfully critiqued mainstream theater, and he loves theater. He loves doing theater and opera, whatever, but he has pointed out its limitations, especially for the oppressed. Mainstream theater is not sure what to do with it because his critique is very profound and very penetrating. And to a certain extent indicts the larger culture for generating monologue as the primary form of communication. That our popular culture, our television news, our television, our government, these are essentially monological structures where we are kind of told the way the world is and the way it's going to be. In our politics, every 4 years, we're allowed to put a mark on a piece of paper as if that's somehow part of the dialogue. I think the extent to which people are getting involved in calling up the radio and talking on radio, even though most of it's fairly right-wing and really abhorrent to me, indicates people wanting to be in a dialogue. It's unfortunate the right-wing sort of hijacked that, and they have people's ear. But I think that eventually what we'll see is that the desire for people to really be in a relationship and to be in dialogue and to be able to create a better future will be something that we will look in the future and say Boal was one of the hallmarks of creating new possibilities for dialogue, and that's what people really want. They want to be able to create their own future, and they want to do it together with other people.
And speaking of the future, do you know what Boal's next project is, or Theater of the Oppressed's next thing?
I'm sorry I can't tell you that right. I think I've heard him talk about a specific kind of project. I know some things he's doing right now that are really thrilling. He's working with a group in South America and Brazil particularly, but I think it's going broader than Brazil, called Sem Terra, which is without land, landless peasants who have decided they're going to take back the land, and they're just taking it. There are parts of Brazil that are owned by landowners. One in particular owns land that is the size of the state of Maine, and much of it's not used. Nobody's on it. The peasants are taking it back, and Sem Terra has designated the Theater of the Oppressed as their official form of theater. So literally, while some of these companies are going along, whether these marchers or demonstrators or whatever, as they take over land, they're using Theater of the Oppressed as a way to look at issues and entertain themselves at the night after many of these activities, whatever. They have a theater that is their own, that entertains, that is enjoyable, but also, asks questions about what they're doing and asks them to be better at what they're doing. So I know the Sem Terra project is really extraordinary. Plus, he's working with a number of prisons in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, and outside of Sao Paulo, in which Theater of the Oppressed is now being designated a form of theater for prisoners to be able to come into dialogue and hopefully understand the sources of their oppression.
Is he still doing theater directing of Shakespeare work, Royal Shakespeare Company?
Yeah, he doesn't do much Shakespeare. He worked with the Royal Shakespeare Company. It was a wonderful project that he really valued, but it was not necessarily coming up to the point of directing fully Shakespeare, but he was working with the members of the Royal Shakespeare Company. He's been directing a number of operas, and he's really enjoyed doing that, making opera into sort of distinctly Brazilian forms. I know he took one of the great operas. Which was it? I can't even say it right now.
La Boheme?
It was La Boheme. It was, I want to say, El Traviata, that's not it. It's the Toreador. Gosh, doggone, why can't I say it? At any rate, he's taken Carmen and has made that into a samba opera, where the music has been samba-ized, so it's really very, very Brazilian. And Boal likes to make things indigenous for people, to find a way to communicate with as many as possible. So those are projects I know he's doing right now. I know he's also involved with his son Julian to develop a project called the International Theater of the Oppressed. So they're trying to get some kind of networking going that would put people in better touch with each other. We think there's about 150 companies now doing Theater of the Oppressed around the world in 40-some different countries. And to get these companies in touch with each other, to lift everybody's ability to do TO, to be better at it, and in that communication process, make TO available more broadly around the world would be a very good thing to do, and that's what they're doing. He and Julian are trying to put this together.
Do you have any closing thoughts that we didn't talk about? Would you like to?
Well, one of the things that I think I've said it earlier, but I think it's really true, and both Paulo Freire and Boal come up with this phrase over and over that imagination is key. Imagination is important. If we can imagine something different, there won't be anything different. So with the Theater of the Oppressed and with all kinds of cultural work, it allows us to imagine something different, to take charge of our life and to move forward with a sense of a better possible future. And that's what the Theater of the Oppressed is about.
Great.